There we go.
Thank you, Christina. And I just want to confirm who's on the phone.
That's Greg Davis. I dialed in. Audio issues.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we ready to kick off?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone to the January meeting of the Reinvestment Workforce Committee. The time is now 2:05. I'll call the meeting to order and do a quick roll call. So John Ing, myself is present. Kyle Abercrombie.
Present.
Corey Betts.
Present.
Andrea Comer.
Here.
Avery Gaddis.
Here.
Andrea Hawkins is not here. I believe she may be joining late. Michael Jefferson. Shirley Skyers Thomas. Kelly Marie Valeries.
Present.
And Kevin Walton. Okay, we do have a quorum and want to recognize that we have many of the SEC staff members also present on the call. And Director McGee, I'm sorry, was that a hand up that I saw?
Yeah, I was just going to say we had a new council member to join the committee. So I don't know if anyone should just make a friendly amendment to include council person Greg Davis to also be a part of the Community and Workforce Development Committee.
Sure, I'll entertain a motion to include council committee.
So moved.
Second, Corey.
Excellent. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? All right, thank you. Well, welcome, Council Member Davis, to the Reinvestment Workforce Committee. So we will move on to item B on the agenda, which is our reinvestment plan. And today we're going to be discussing the notice of funding opportunity. Before I hand it over to Executive Director McGee, I just want to share, the team's been working really hard, not only on the strategic plan as we've seen being developed over the last several months, but also beginning to think about how do we take that and start operationalizing on it. So I've had some conversations. I'm really excited about what they're bringing forward. Hoping today they'll walk us through sort of the process and approach for reinvestment for looking at the end of this fiscal year going into the next fiscal year. And then, obviously entertain any questions that we have from the committee members. Today's goal is to have just a conversation and provide any feedback that we all might have as a committee. And then the goal is to bring this to the full council for approval so that we can get moving on the NOFO that needs to be put out. So with that, Executive Director McGee, floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. And again, welcome to all of the members. Welcome to the committee, Greg. I think all of our committees, we provide the secret sauce, but I think the even more secret sauce is here on the Community and Workforce Development Committee. I don't think, so Thomas Fulton, who might that be? Primary?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a Demas employee. I'm a primary prevention services coordinator for their prevention health promotion division. And I just work in kind of the cannabis related space. So just taking a keen interest. It's my understanding that this is a public meeting. Is it okay that I'm here?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Glad to have you.
Thank you.
All right, so I am going to share my screen. And in full transparency, we will not be voting on any notice of funding. Again, just to underscore Madam Chairperson's remarks, this is just an opportunity to have more of an open dialogue. Can you all see my screen? Something like weird is happening. You don't see my notes, right? Just my screen. Perfect.
Correct.
So again, welcome to today's Reinvestment and Workforce Development Committee meeting. As you all know, our mission is very clear. We want to promote equitable economic prosperity by supporting social equity entrepreneurs and reinvesting in communities impacted by the war on drugs. Our vision, we want to see these communities thrive, and we want to see them extremely prosperous. So my presentation is broken out into two sections. I'll give you some updates on community reinvestment and likewise workforce development. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page, I wanted to just provide some background information on where we've come from, right? So that we're all starting at the same place. We all know that in 2023, the Connecticut Social Equity Council announced a $6 million grant funding opportunity where $6 million were giving out to 6 grant managers as listed on the screen there. We know that the funding was used for developing, expanding, and supporting programs that uplift communities and strengthen families disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. We also know as a result of that approach of distributing $6 million, we identified some really clear pain points of which I really want to make sure you all are aware. And for those of you who are not aware, just bringing that back to the forefront. Some of those pain points included, not being able to measure or roll up the impact of the first round of the $6 million from 23, lack of data analysis of a lot of our community conversations and surveys and feedback from the BPRC, to name a few. Grant managers, as a result of a virtual conversation we had with them, they shared with us that there was not enough time, essentially, to respond to a notice of funding opportunity, nor were there clear expectations regarding reporting, including evaluation and monitoring of these funds. As already mentioned on several occasions, we realized that the 2023 investment was perceived as more of a scattered than focused on a specific impact area and program that lacked essentially a defined funding strategy, thus defaulting in that sprinkle approach of $6 million toward many different DIAs without specific focus. Lastly, grant managers, we know that they all had, subscribed to their internal monitoring and evaluation practices. Unfortunately, there weren't any clear monitoring and evaluation internally within the Social Equity Council with respect to these types of funds. And so it's with those pain points that really started a much deeper conversation with our council and also with our strategic partners, Slalom, and helping us to kick off our strategic planning. Many of you are familiar with this slide deck, but I always want to make sure that our counselors understand we are very serious about the recommendations from the strategic plan, the initiatives within the strategic plans, and the activities that will drive our work. I won't spend a great deal on this particular slide, but I did want to make sure you all know that this is the premise for a lot of our activities that we will talk about in short order. I do, however, want to pause for just a second through you, Madam Chair, should any of our members have any questions regarding key activities, any of the assumptions and dependencies that's presented here on the community reinvestment focus. Awesome. And I'm looking at your faces, but I'm also looking at my presentation, so please just yell if I'm going a little fast here. All right, So here is the bread and butter, folks. This program, formerly known as the Community Reinvestment Program, has been affectionately renamed, reimagined, and revitalized program. We'll call it R2. So you'll hear me mention R2. I am referring to community reinvestment. Column 1, all right, based off our strategic planning and our recommendation, the R2 program essentially will prioritize disproportionate impacted areas, namely Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, New London, Norwich area, Stamford, and Waterbury. And it is also important to know within these 6 regions, as I will refer to them as, many of the eligible community organizations or the sub-recipients will have to qualify, number one, and I want to underscore that, qualify and be eligible, but they are going to have to provide services in the areas of economic development with an emphasis on workforce development and infrastructure, reentry programs, and youth initiatives. While these are big, big buckets of categories, the staff and I, alongside our research team, we're working to hone in within each of those categories on very, very specific programs that will require specific outcomes. So I don't want y'all to think that these are just loosey-goosey buckets and we're just going to ride high, give out money, and life is great. All right, that's not the case. Moving on to column 2, program design. The R2 program is intended for organizations that provide services in their communities that have at least one of the 3 R2 program priorities, of which I've already outlined in column 1. Now, while data, was available for us during our pilot program, we have been able to extrapolate a lot of the results, from community conversations, peer review data, and designs, the council, our legislative partners, Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, and other stakeholders to help inform these program priorities. It is extremely important to my team and also to the council that we are able to articulate data, and the data supports what it is that we're funding and why, and also support outcomes. In column 3, just because I know some of you are like, all right, let's talk the money. Let's talk about money. What are we doing with the money? The council approved a $5.6 million investment to administer the R2 program, okay? Now, I'm gonna slow down a little bit because I think it's extremely important that we're all on the same page and we spend some time asking questions for clarity, and we're also in the position to take any recommendations and feedback from you, our counselors. It's important to know that grant managers will be welcome to respond to a notice of funding opportunity. We have not, come up with a date yet. All right, we're not putting the cart before the horse. We have not done that yet. But we want grant managers who have participated in the past and those who are interested in participating now know that they will be welcome to respond to a NOFO for a period of 3 years. Selected community organizations, meaning our subrecipients, will receive level funding for 3 years to ensure a few things: budgetary predictability and program sustainability. And a lot of the information that I'm sharing with you is not out of thin air. A lot of this is direct feedback from many of our grant managers that participated in round 1 of the $6 million disbursement. Funding will be based on a global funding amount We're still tweaking and working through numbers, but for the sake of this exercise, counselors, I just want to walk you through it. Funding will be based on a global funding amount totaling $21.6 million for, again, a period of 3 years. That is essentially $7.2 million a year for 6 regions. And if you break that down even more, let's just take New London, Norwich area. We're looking at a $1.2 million investment to support subrecipients who meet the eligibility requirements around our program priorities. The 5.6 million from fiscal year 24-25 of which you all have approved will be contemplated with an additional 1.2 million from fiscal year 25-26, again, for a total of 7.2 million to fund the first funding period. One of the things that I think is extremely important for me to underscore here is that subrecipients will be funded, again, for a 3-year period. So once a subrecipient receive their green light that they've been approved for their funding amount, they then will be locked in for those 3 years. And we can talk a little bit more on the budget formula, the tiers, all of that good stuff at the conclusion of column 4. Outcomes, 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 outcomes. I'm going to be preaching it. Outcomes, outcomes are extremely important to the SEC. Program funds will be used to improve infrastructure and workforce, reentry and diversion services for people involved with the criminal justice system, provide access to legal representation and advice, encourage investment and economic growth, enhance a 2-generational system, and support programs that improve the social determinants of health. From my perspective, and on behalf of our research team and our staff, our community reinvestment officers, we don't want to overly prescribe our program dollars, or rather, we do want to do that, but program design. We want to make sure we're at least providing tracks for many of these subrecipients to run on, but also understand that we have some clear expectations on outcomes. The contractual requirements will mandate grant managers to implement direct oversight of program implementation, use of funds, and data collection. The SEC will require monthly financial reporting and quarterly programmatic reports to be reviewed by the community reinvestment officers and our council prior to dispersing additional funds. I'm going to pause here, Madam Chair, just to let this settle a little bit, yield to any questions regarding the budget, and just thoughts, immediate feedback. Again, this deck will be shared with all of you counselors at the conclusion of today's meeting for you to kind of take another look at it. Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. I'll open the floor to questions. You can raise your hand, or Councilman Abercrombie and then Councilwoman Valories.
Hey team, first of all, great job on the presentation. Very exciting to kick this off again. One minor question. Do we have a contingency plan well, let me start by saying, if we're committing to a 3-year commitment of dollars, is there a contingency plan if one of those commitments falls through, or some, I see that we're going to be doing quarterly reports to review prior to dispersing additional funds. Just wondering, in the event something changes, do we start from scratch and do another NOFA, or just wondering if that had been given any thought?
Yeah, we've been thinking through that a little bit, but I don't want to speak out of legal context. So I'll toss it over to my legal director to make sure I'm not speaking out of line. I do have a response, by the way, but. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Sure. So is your question specific to the grant managers, or is it more tailored towards the community organizations that would be subrecipients under the NOFO
The
by
grant
way of the grant
managers.
managers? So I would say, initially we anticipate more than six grant managers applying, right? We would only be issuing 6 contracts. So in the event that any of those top 6 scoring grant managers were to warrant, termination of the contract halfway through the period, we could then go to the next highest scoring person. We wouldn't necessarily be required to issue a new NOFO or an RFP for that matter to recruit that replacement grant manager, if you would.
Thank you.
All right. Councilwoman Valeries?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions. I know that there was some conversations earlier on whether we're going to meet the grants directly to the grantees or we were going to go through the grant maker process again. So it looks like the proposal is to use the grant maker process again. What is the process going to be for the SEC's approval of the grants that the grant makers make?
Yeah,
That's
so
question
we,
number one.
yep, great question. As you can imagine, Kelly, we're still making sure we, number one, synthesize all of the recommendations from our strategic plan and in real time have direct conversations with previous grant makers to make sure we're not missing anything. We will have a review committee on the SEC side that will include a combination of our staff and also members of our council. So whereas in the past there was like this community group, there was another group, and like all of these different players, we're streamlining that slightly. Number one, to adhere to state policies and procedures, but also making sure real time our council members and staff are privy to the types of applicants that are coming in, the challenges that might pursue, and any other items that might come about. So we will have a review committee that will be a part of the process from start to finish.
Great. And then I would imagine that as part of that review would be looking at braiding funding sources from other agencies and things like that. And so you're going to put all that together in the application process, I would imagine, so that all of the grant makers are using the same application to their community organizations.
Yeah, so glad you're bringing that up. So this is the first. We wanted to come to you all, our board, our council, just to give you sort of our scope, the strategy. Simultaneously, we're working on the official notice. It's like a 45-page document that we will be sharing with you all in short order so that you can read through it. And then we have another meeting to respond and to ask questions. But I didn't feel it would be appropriate to lead with this notice of funding document without having this conversation on strategy and approach. But yes, it will outline, it will be streamlined. Every region, it will be the same one application with clear expectations on how dollars are to be spent, utilized, outcomes, monitoring, evaluation, all of the above.
Great. Thank you very much. There's a lot of great thought process put together there. Fully supportive of that. So thank you for your work in it.
Yep.
Awesome. Councilman Palmer.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. And I had this conversation before, sir, and if I'm being redundant, then my apologies. And if this was sort of covered, but as piggybacking on what Councilwoman Valerie's talked about in terms of just kind of the review process, I know that in our first iteration, sort of where we ran afoul, was in not sort of comparing funding distributions from other entities, whether it was state agencies or whether it was the pot that the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus has access to. So just reinforcing that the need to have that be part of the process so that we are not being duplicative in terms of our investments. Thanks.
Truly noted. It's a great point.
Thank you.
If I may add, just to both of your points, the NOFO will have a component where applicants will be required to disclose other sources of state funding so that we can take that into account as we evaluate their applications.
Any additional questions for Director McGee and team? Okay, well, I just want to reiterate, I think this was, I know it's a lot of information, or can feel like a lot of information because it's been a bit since we've started kind of going deep into rolling this out, but I think this plan makes a lot of sense. Excited to see the structure and approach, and looking forward to seeing more details come out of this as we keep going forward.
Awesome. And before, if you're okay with this, Madam Chair, before we move on to workforce development, one of the things that I really just want to put out on the forefront with respect to the R2 program, I don't want to take a year to talk about disbursement of these funds, but I also am reminded of a few comments internally by my staff. We will not move in haste. We will be sure to dot I's, cross T's, and make sure, because we only have one more time at this, from my perspective, to get this right. And I believe we are poised to do not only what's right, but to ensure that the people that these dollars are intended for will be used in a more impactful way. So I'm excited about it. I really hope you all are. And we're on to something. So that said, I do want to quickly transition to the second half of our meeting and also provide you all with some workforce development updates. Before I move forward, I do want to thank Office of Workforce Strategies, Connecticut colleges for their constant and consistent support on helping us to inform our strategies and our output. Kelly, thank you for your leadership and helping and just, refocusing and sharing with us our next iteration of the workforce development. And you too, Tiffany. I know Tiffany's like, but I'm working too. Yes, you are. Likewise with our community reinvestment officers. All right, so I am not going to read verbatim background information, but I politely put, just for your viewing, that we are guided by our statute, okay? And I am constantly reminding my team, you use this as your guiding post, your document. However, it is our responsibility to help dress this thing up and make it make sense to where we are today, okay? So, for those of you who have never seen this, again, we will share this deck with you at the conclusion of the meeting. A few pain points, similar to our community reinvestment R2 program. We're all familiar with the $1 million spent on an unsuccessful accelerator workforce development program that didn't have the expected impact. We lacked essentially communication on engaging prospective social equity applicants at the onset of their social equity council journey, which from my perspective would improve the end-to-end social equity entrepreneur journey. Also was called out in our strategic planning. And, I was being cute by adding this. So while the reclassification, is a major step forward, and we're talking federally, cannabis still isn't fully legalized on the federal level. Right now, over 30 states have legalized cannabis for medicinal and adult use, but the federal law still bans it. Okay. And this reclassification could help clear up, I think you all will agree, some of the confusion between state and federal laws. State agencies with federal designations are more likely to be audited and fined by feds, thus limited participation. And what do I mean by that? We have state agencies that we have to be extremely strategic with respect to their involvement, their participation, regarding workforce, regarding loans, you name it. And lastly, there's been limited internal knowledge on the needs of the industry and no clear strategy or agreed upon strategy for industry specific needs. Again, similar to our workforce, our community reinvestment, we have within our strategic plan an area focused on workforce development. Again, many of you are familiar with this deck. Might I remind you, it's guiding our work. So please, council, know that the dollars spent on our strategic plan is being put to good use and guiding all of our work. All right, so what are we doing? In terms of our workforce development strategy, we're working in partnership with OWS, Connecticut College, and other industry partners to establish a comprehensive workforce development approach, inclusive of the cannabis industry and other sectors. I think OWS has really created a statewide platform for agencies like mine to participate and hear firsthand, what's happening, what are the needs, what are the gaps, where do we as an agency fit in so that we can better inform many of our employers, our cannabis employers, not limited to, on the opportunities to help create and train workforce. What are our goals within workforce? We want to support entrepreneurship, okay? I've been saying for a while, the Social Equity Council was created, yes, to support the social equity or the cannabis industry, but we all know that the war on drugs had a greater impact on food, education, housing, you name it, right? And so there are individuals who hail from disproportionately impacted communities who want to start a business and they just don't know how. We want to be of support. We want to provide those opportunities as well. We also want to stimulate a workforce outside of cannabis, of which I've already mentioned. And then lastly, we want to train a workforce for the cannabis industry. Work alongside many of our social equity entrepreneurs who are already in this space, and they're helping us to create certificate programs that will help create more opportunities for individuals who hail from DIAs. So our goals are clear. Our goals are extremely clear. Our path forward, I'll be working alongside Tiffany, who's on our staff, working on the workforce development program, helping to review relevant documents and data for unique cannabis industry needs, by hosting monthly virtual meetings with our social equity entrepreneurs. I'll share some dates at the conclusion of this update. You all are welcome to participate in those virtual meetings. But again, we will utilize those meetings to help develop more robust and meaningful programming for our Cs. We'll continue to interview key stakeholders to ascertain capacity and constraints of different stakeholders and gather and compare data to help inform the right scope of partnerships, right? Everybody, it's not a one size fit all in this world. And we want to make sure we're extremely efficient with time. You all are busy, but we want to make sure folks are clear on what the partnership entails. We want to deepen our relationship with Connecticut College System and leverage their existing cannabis studies certificate program and create other programs with the funding that we have available. And lastly, just establish partnerships. So that essentially concludes my updates on reinvestment and workforce. I do want to share with you, this is our roadmap. You all are familiar with this as well. Sometimes it gives me a little anxiety, a little bit, because I'm looking at all of these dates. But I will say, counselors, we are ahead. We are ahead in every single area. And there are 4 very clear areas: staff, council, community, and industry. And the team is working toward each of these activities. And working alongside each of you as well. And shameless plugs, okay? I have office hours. Please come see me. I want to see you. If you don't want to see me in person, you can come check me virtually. I am here. I'm here every day, but Monday and Wednesdays are the days that I prefer to just sit and be available to you, my fellow council members. If you cannot make a Monday or a Wednesday, I will yield my time and make sure I'm available to any of you. We also have a special council meeting on Monday, January 27th. That meeting, I'm praying it only be a half hour, y'all, but we have 6 to 7, some really important items we want to share with you. There is our regular council meeting on Tuesday, February 4th at 10 at the state capitol. We'll be in room 310. We might even have a special guest, y'all, so please come. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we meet monthly with our social equity entrepreneurs. Counselors are welcome to attend. We offer 2 opportunities for these businesses to come and share with us their concerns, whatever they have, but we also use this opportunity to update them on anything that we have going on with the Social Equity Council. So you'll see Wednesday, February 5th, and then also on Tuesday, February 11th. That concludes my updates. Back to you, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, was on mute. Thank you so much for that. Questions?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we've got a couple of hands up. I'll start with Councilman Betts.
That was really good, Mr. McGee. But I do have a question, because as always, when it comes to workforce, I have to ask this.
Yes, sir.
And is what strategies can we implement to ensure that workforce development programs lead directly to actual job opportunities? Because there's a lot of workforce, but then there's no jobs that's connected to the bottom of it. So just making sure that we're getting employers involved as well, right? Because we can do the training, but then individuals don't get the job. So
that's a most important point to me. A person who comes from one of these DIAs, we train to train, only to train some more, right? And so one of the outcomes is just that. We want to make sure we're not only training, but the incentive should be at the conclusion of your training, you're locking into a job, essentially. But I see our fearless leader from OWS. She may have a great response for you.
Thank you for the question, Councilman Betts. I think what you're referring to is the old train and pray model, where we train people and pray
Yep.
they get a job. We no longer utilize that model, and all training that we do is linked to employer, because it will be employer driven. So through the work that OWS has done with Career Connect, we have engaged employers heavily in all of our training programs through the regional sector partnerships. And we intend to do the very same thing with regards to any cannabis specific training, and that we will be ensured that there are a demand for the people that are going through the training programs. And the goal with every good, solid training program is that the employers actually come into those job training programs in the early parts of those programs and engage with the trainees. And the best case scenario is that they have a conditional offer based on successfully completing those jobs. So that premise will be fundamental in all of the training programs that we
That's
are
awesome.
participating in.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from council members? I just want to keep an eye on the chat too. Councilman
And
Betts, I'm
Kelly,
guessing that's your.
we'll definitely update the invite. Thanks for that.
Okay. I don't see any additional questions. And again, this might be something where, folks, if a lot of information shared out, definitely want to take it in. If there are additional questions, I really encourage you to utilize those office hours this week, next week. We've got a couple more council meetings coming up, so please do take advantage of that. If you have questions for me, feel free to shoot me an email or text. Happy to chat through as well. But with that, if there's nothing else, anything for the good of the order?
Just real quick, just want to make sure that we're getting the slides.
Yep. Immediately following this meeting, I'll send it out to the committee.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent. Well, if nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
So move.
Second.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, Director McGee and staff, for walking us through that. Very exciting times. Looking forward to seeing more. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Thanks,
Thank
team.
you.
Nice job, Chair.